There's a lot of attention in Australia on startups, but much less on scale-ups and high-growth firms who really provide a significant contribution in terms of jobs and economic growth. So it was an excellent opportunity for us to join the Growth Project to better understand the challenges of growth, how Australian firms are successfully responding, and also to see what we could learn from firms in other countries.
The range of industries in the study surprised us, as well as their geographical spread. Many of the firms we spoke to were in regional areas. They were not all capital city firms. And the study was not all about high-tech startups either, but included firms from quite traditional industries who were being clever and innovative in their field. These included hospitality, mining, agriculture, building and construction, and tourism, as well as high-tech manufacturing. Our sample included some firms that had been founded 30 or 40 years ago, but also firms that were barely 10 years old.
Up next, you will hear from International Project Lead Charlene Zietsma, followed by a discussion on what we found in Australia.
Hi, I'm Charlene Zietsma. I'm an associate professor at Penn State University, and I'm the chief investigator of the international research project called the Growth Project. We've been fortunate to talk to 45 different companies in 7 different countries in this project, and it's been great to hear their stories. We've talked to companies in Canada, in the US, in the UK, in Australia, in Israel, in the Netherlands, and in Pakistan, and we're continuing to collect data as we go forward. We've got research partners in Australia, Canada, the US, and the Netherlands. We have academics, and we have a practice lead as well, someone coming from a practitioner perspective. We're looking at firms that are between about 8 million a year and 200 million a year in revenues or turnover. And we're looking at companies that have grown at least 30% a year or more for at least 3 years. This is an interesting group of companies because they face a lot of challenges as they scale up. It's usually a very chaotic period for them. And in addition, they're really starting to formalize the organization from an entrepreneurial startup organization to a larger, more professionally managed firm. A lot of firms in this area tend to face some significant challenges and potentially could die from the problems of growth. I started this research project because I was trying to teach my students how to grow their businesses, and there was very little material available. Very limited material in terms of academic research and very limited material in terms of practitioner research and case studies. And I thought, this is such an important part of the entrepreneurial process. It's okay to start businesses, but unless we grow them, we don't actually get the economic benefit that they promise. I thought we need to do some research in this area. So scaling is really difficult, and only about 1% of firms actually make it past that $10 million a year mark. And in fact, if you look at firms that make it past the $50 million a year mark, it's closer to 1/100,000th of a percent. So it's a very small number that make it that far. In looking across the firms that we've interviewed and going to the research as well, what we've identified are 8 key points to think about when you're growing your business. The first one is to begin with the end in mind. The second is to nail it and then scale it, to really get your business model in line. The third one is to pivot, but pivot with a purpose. Consider the core brand promise of your business before you pivot. The fourth is to let go as you grow. The fifth one is about people agility. The sixth is about building the scaffolding for growth. Seventh, don't forget the cash, very critical. And the 8th is about targeted execution. The first tip is to begin with the end in mind. Think about what your objectives are for the business. Is this a lifestyle business? Is this a family dynasty? Are you going for world domination? What is it that you want out of this business? And of course, growth for its own sake is the ideology of a cancer cell, as Edward Abbey says. It's not exactly what you want to go for. You want to think, what is it that I want out of this business? And is this business a good business for the world? When you're thinking about this at the beginning, you can start to design your business up front so that it actually works for your long-term objectives. If you would like to maintain control of the business over time, have it as a family business or continue to run it into the future, then you should not be thinking about taking venture capital, too much angel investment. It'll be much more difficult for you to get out of that financing later on. So the more you're able to bootstrap your business in that case, the better off you will be. Because if you take venture capital, if you take angel investment, the money that you take early on is going to make it more difficult for you to maintain control into the future. Angel investment and venture capital investment assumes an exit event. And if you don't plan to exit the business, think very carefully. Now, if you do plan to exit the business, it's also important to think about how. Do you want to do an IPO? Do you want to make yourself a bright, shiny object for sale to another firm? If you're doing an IPO, then having the support of venture capital through this process is really helpful. They've done IPOs before. They want to do IPOs. They will help you through the process. If you are planning to make yourself a bright, shiny object, we have one example of a company that we interviewed who very clearly, right from the beginning when they started their businesses, this is a group that started 5 businesses that scaled over $200 million. They thought about who the potential acquirer would be before they started the business. Then they began by putting in the systems and structures in place that the potential acquirer was already using. They talked about it as making sure it was a good tuck-in. So when it came time to sell the business, when they'd scaled up to a certain point, they could go to their preferred acquirer and say, we have this business, it's using your systems, here's the staff, here's the structure, here are the systems, you can just buy it. It's fine. And they were able to do that 5 times. The other consideration when you get started is to think about how you're going to share equity with your staff members. You don't have to, of course, but if you've got some key people, you probably want to think very hard about how you're going to incentivize them to stay with the business as you grow and to motivate them to actually put their best efforts into the business. And equity is a common way, but you want to be a little bit careful about how you use it. One company we talked to started up 2 branches of the business at the same time and gave a good chunk of equity to the 2 people running the branch in another location. And guess what? The one branch grew like crazy and the other one did not. But those 2 partners who didn't put as much effort in were able to reap the benefits of the entire business growth. What you want to be careful about is to put in some earnouts so that people earn their equity through their effort over time. Same goes for professional service firms. They're kind of a special case for equity because with a professional service firm, your value proposition, your competitive advantage in the market is completely based on the staff that you have. And you want to make sure that your best assets don't walk out the door. One consulting firm we talked to had a process where, and they implemented it later on, but they had a process where they said, every year we're going to add 10% of equity, and it will dilute the equity that's already there, but it will be 10% additional and we'll grant it to the people who are the top performers of the organization. And part of the earnings then go out to those people as payments on their equity. So there's a bonus pool. Everyone got a base salary that was below market, but with the bonus pool, as long as they were performing at an average level, they were making market wages. And then with the equity earnouts, the most promising performers were being paid much better and were incentivized to stay with the organization over the longer term. The second key point is to nail it before you scale it. That means to think very carefully about what value will you deliver to whom? How will you deliver it consistently? What's your go-to-market plan? And what's your profit formula? You'll see on the slide I've put up the business model canvas that Osterwalder has designed, and which you can get online for free in many different places. This is a chance for you to actually look in more depth at your business model and see, is this going to work? There's a chance for you to test your hypotheses about these ideas. So you may say, I think these customers are going to be interested in my product. The only way to actually find out for sure is to go out and check with them. That may mean you have to have a minimum viable product to show them. It may mean that you are getting out of your comfort zone and talking to people you wouldn't normally talk to, but it's a chance to really learn, first of all, whether or not your plan is right, and secondly, you might get some other ideas to tweak it even more. So this part of it is to just really understand how you can nail the model before you scale it. That's not to say that your nailing it stops there, because in fact, later on, as the business grows, you will probably need to modify your business model again, and potentially you're going to be adding more products and services to your business as you go. That nailing process is something you should keep doing as you go. The third point is to pivot with a purpose. We all know that it's important to pivot periodically with your business in order to maximize the chance that your model will appeal to customers. But you want to be careful as well as you're making those pivots. Pivoting can be both costly and extremely valuable. It's just as important to know what not to do as it is to know what to do. As entrepreneurs, we can become hyper alert to opportunities. You can't chase them all down, or you will lose the coherence and focus that your business requires in order to scale. Some examples, we talked to a business that was an online bespoke clothing provider, and in the beginning they saw themselves as a technology company, and partway through they realized they were a multi-channel retailer, and so they started to act like a multi-channel retailer, and that was distressing for their engineers who actually joined a technology company. They lost 45 engineers that year because they no longer wanted to work with a retail company. That said, it was a necessary transition for them in order to meet their market. Another firm that we talked to was, it started as a magazine provider. Magazines are not a sustainable business model into the future frequently, but what they did is actually they had a passionate following of millennial males, not a target market that is easily accessible in many different places. Initially, they added on clothing, a line of clothing, because people were passionate about the brand and they thought they could scale that. That turned out to be not such a good model. Clothing is not a high margin business. It didn't work so well for them. But someone suggested they actually start filming their content, the really hard-hitting reporting that they were covering in the magazine. And in filming it, they started creating documentaries and TV shows, and these became even more appealing. They got requests all over the world. It fit with their brand promise really well, much better than clothing. And as a result, they got requests as well by companies to create advertising for them that would meet their market of millennial males. Again, they wanted to be careful that their advertising was consistent with their brand promise, though. In that pivot, they made sure that the advertising that they did was also associated with that hard-hitting, gritty reporting content. The fourth point is that you need to let go as you grow. And this is one that's extremely difficult for many entrepreneurs. When you're first starting the business, you're really in touch with the customers, in touch with the technology, you know the market, and you run the business by instinct, and it works really well. But as you start to grow, you can no longer do everything yourself. We talked to many entrepreneurs that dealt with burnout, that started to have serious questions about whether or not they wanted to continue with this level of stress and work, and realized they had to start hiring more people and delegating more effectively. Michael Dell tells a funny story about when he was scaling his business, and at one point one of his employees came to him and said, "The Coke machine just stole my quarter." And he said, "What are you telling me for?" And the guy said, "Well, you're the only one with the key to the Coke machine." Okay, time to figure out how you can let go of different things and delegate them to other people. It becomes difficult when you expect others to do it exactly the way you do it, or you micromanage them. And many entrepreneurs fall into this trap. It's something to be avoided. It's an ongoing problematic issue. One of the other things that you can use to help you with this micromanagement issue is to actively seek and accept help with governance and support for the business. So some people will go out and talk to family members and friends. That's great if they know what it's like to run a business in this state, but they don't always know that. Consultants can be difficult because large consulting firms charge too much money for many scaling firms and probably don't have a really good touch with business at that level. And there aren't that many consultants that actually serve this kind of a market. Many of the firms that we talk to have set up strategic advisory boards. They pick people who have experience in their industry or in their customer's industry, or they pick people who have experience scaling and who can provide guidance and support to help them scale the business. And I would say that was a key differentiator between those who had a relatively easy time scaling and those who were tearing their hair out through the entire process. The fifth point is people agility, and I call it people agility because you need to be agile with people yourself, and they also need to be agile. What's important in this phase is to hire the right people as you grow, and you're going to have different people that are the right people as you grow than were important in the startup phases. In the startup phases, you need people who were generalists and could do all sorts of different things. Those people may no longer be the experts that you need to be doing some of the scaling processes in certain areas. So if, for example, you had someone who was doing all your marketing up until this point, you may actually have to have them hire their own new boss, someone who has expertise in marketing and can create that functional expertise within the business to allow the business to grow. That may be difficult, and a lot of the entrepreneurs that we talked to mentioned it was particularly challenging dealing with not promoting some of those early people and actually putting in people above them, and yet that was what was required for the business. Others talked about having people that actually moved fluidly through various roles of the organization. They were go-to people who could be counted on over and over again to do really good things. And so whenever they were starting up a new area or needed a new project handled, they would move that person into the new area. So those people with the very generalist skill set that are good at project management and are willing to be fluid about their job descriptions, those are great people to have through this process as well. Another key thing with people is that you want to hire people that are smarter than you. And that sounds like pretty basic advice, and yet it's often very difficult for people to hire someone who may threaten them or may challenge them. This is not about egos. This is about growing the business, and you want to hire the smartest people you can and allow them the room to actually grow and develop the business further. In addition, you want to think about incentivizing them, of course. So again, think about the equity, think about earnouts, think about phantom shares that you may be able to offer people so that they get rewarded for their impact on the business as they contribute. One of the things that people often wonder about is the idea of big company people versus small company people. When you're in a startup phase, you need people who can make do with very little, who can do all sorts of different things, and who are looking for the quick fix, the fast solution. They can make something happen. Big company people bring a different orientation where they are much more likely to develop good systems, good analytics. They use data to drive the business. They are able to create the replicable systems and processes that enable you to produce quality consistently and serve your market well. The problem some of our entrepreneurs have found when they hire big company people is that they cannot adapt to not necessarily having the data that they need or the support staff that they're used to. And in a growing organization, often these things aren't available. So you need a hybrid, actually, someone who can roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty and deal with the problems associated with a growing organization, but who also have the understanding of big company systems and processes so they can look for opportunities to put those things in place as they go. The sixth point is to build the scaffolding for growth. What do I mean by scaffolding? What I mean is to build the structure, the systems, the processes, standard operating procedures that you need in order to scale the business in an efficient way. In this way, you have systems that guide people's behavior. You don't need the direct management control over individuals. You can have them follow procedures. It also ensures that you've got more replicability over time. How do you get it? You get it from IT systems, you get it from human resource systems, from financial planning systems, inventory control systems. These are all important things to start to build into the business as you're scaling up. And it's really important to think about the scalability of those systems as well. A lot of companies start with putting something together that they've either designed themselves, maybe they've bought off the shelf, or maybe they've really custom built something on a platform that isn't really suited to it, but it was cheap. And now they're in a position where they say, if we actually want to throw 10 times the volume at it, we need to find something that's going to work now and in the future. Different ways to go on this. We had one interviewee who bought a way overbuilt system. He bought an IT system that was so much bigger than his business required that he in fact had to pay for the sales reps to fly out to present it to him because they didn't think there was any way he would buy it. But what it allowed him to do is to scale very quickly and very easily across many different markets because he had the IT system. His competitors did not. It gave him a big jump on the market. On the other hand, many companies are saying, let's try not to formalize too heavily at first because things are going to change. We might make commitments to the wrong equipment, systems, or materials, and that may end up being a waste. What companies often do as well is start to rethink how they do their processes when they develop new systems. It allows them to look for waste in the system, things that don't need to be done the way that they're done, and to redesign from the ground up. So inputting these systems, highly associated with growing firms in the research, but also very important as a means for thinking about how to do the business better. Cash is really critical to manage as you're scaling your business. We've had more than one entrepreneur, several of them that we've interviewed, who have scaled up their businesses and then had to scale back because they couldn't meet the payroll or some change in the environment created issues for them that they no longer had the cash to manage. It can be a big issue. If you're self-financing your business, there are a few different ways that you can ensure you have enough cash generated within the business to help you grow faster. The first one is to speed your cash flow through the system. You can increase your accounts payable days, reduce your accounts receivable days, carry inventory for shorter periods of time. There are a whole range of different things that you can do to speed up cash through that cycle. You can also change your business model so that maybe you're leasing things instead of purchasing them, freeing up some cash. You're using cloud-based services instead of building and developing your own, freeing up some cash. These are things that can help you to manage the cash so that you have the resources then that are necessary for growth. Managing cash is really important for growth. It's the oxygen that will fuel growth. The last point number 8, is targeted execution. Execution is everything when you're growing the business, and it involves all of the different elements that we talked about. What I would encourage you to do is think about what critical metrics are important for you in managing the business. And you can have many different metrics. I'd encourage you to think about what is the metric. It's probably not profitability. You want something that's closer to your profit-creating engine than profitability. What is it that you can drive in any particular quarter that's going to help you grow your business? Ideally, you pick one critical metric, you pick 3 to 5 different priorities that are going to drive that metric, and you get everybody on the same page. Make sure that you've communicated that information, make sure that people have thought about that metric and their contribution to it, and that they are being driven to that particular objective. The company I mentioned where they scaled up 5 times, they had a very metric-driven culture, and each person in the organization had 3 key priorities that they were held accountable for each week. So they needed to have perfect execution on those 3 priorities. And if they did it, they got a $25 Visa card every week, something along those lines, a reward for perfect execution. Not perfect, they got nothing. We recommend using dashboarding in order to think about in the different areas, what are the key metrics that you're going to focus on, what are the key things that you need to pay attention to. And that dashboarding will make sure that you maintain the focus that you need. You can't track everything, ensure the focus is there. So we've talked about 8 key lessons that you can use to help to scale your business. We talked about beginning with the end in mind, knowing what you want out of this business. We talked about nailing it and then scaling it and continuing to do so as the business grows. We talked about pivoting with a purpose, letting go as you grow and being able to delegate more. We talked about people agility. We talked about building the scaffolding for growth and cash management strategies. And finally, we ended with the importance of targeted execution. I want to encourage you to think about these things as you think about how to grow your business. Each of these will provide a different driver to help grow your business, and thinking about them carefully should help you to avoid some of the pain that others have experienced in the chaotic period of scaling their businesses.
We saw similar responses in our Australian data to those internationally. So far in our analysis, 3 areas stood out. Firstly, scaffolding for growth. This is the tension between innovating and implementing formal management systems. We saw Aussie firms introducing what we describe as light touch formalisation. So not having a 100-page strategic plan, but a 1-page document. Significantly increasing communication with staff of all levels, and also digitising HR content to standardise and simplify. The second issue was around letting go as you grow, similar to the international findings. However, what we saw Australian firms doing is keeping close to either their technology, their key customers, or their staff. This is not micromanaging, but listening and responding. There was a very short distance between staff and the leadership team, which meant they could quickly address problems or rapidly innovate. The third main issue related to people agility. The common refrain was getting the right people who would fit the growth mindset of the firm, often hiring based on attitude and values over competence when you could skill up on site. Values alignment was particularly important when many Australian firms needed to employ specific talent based overseas or on the other side of the country. This immediately required them to rethink their organisational structure. Overall, what we observed is that these firms are great at managing innovation. This was because they had leaders and managers who were personally reflective. They understood what they were good at and what they were not. They were constantly reading and reading widely, making them open to new ideas. This meant that they were aware of developments in other industries unrelated to their own, and they would often borrow ideas. They kept up a process of trial and error that really became a part of their workplace culture. These are important insights because the assessments of the Australian innovation system by the OECD and other national inquiries constantly show that the weakest part of our innovation system is management capability. We will continue analysing our data, comparing the Australian experience to other countries, and generating further insights on how we can build management capability for innovation.
I really want to thank the entrepreneurs that have been involved in the study so far because they've provided invaluable insights, and I hope that you will actually find these valuable to you as you consider how to scale your business. I'm looking forward to continuing to do the research, continuing to generate some new insights, so please stay tuned. We'll have more for you later.